crypto market is constantly evolving with new investment products emerging and some going away, plus high volatility, a hallmark of the industry. It's been over a year since Bitcoin ETFs received U.S. approval, and now the race for market share is in full swing. One company at the forefront of innovation, Bitwise. Joining us now to discuss the latest in crypto investing is Hunter Horsley, CEO of Bitwise Asset Management. Hunter, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start out with just introducing people who may not be familiar with what Bitwise is and what you all do. If you could explain that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Bitwise is a crypto specialist asset manager. Some people know us for our Bitcoin ETF, the Bitwise Bitcoin ETF, ticker BITB, or the Bitwise Ethereum ETF, ticker ETHW. But Bitwise today is a firm that manages $12 billion of client assets, serves thousands of wealth management firms, a very large set of individual investors making their own decisions, and is about 100 people across the US and Europe focused on the digital asset space singularly to create investment solutions to help investors get access and then to support investors with research and help them navigate what's happening in the space.
How would you characterize where we are in terms of the crypto journey, in particular Bitcoin? Is it mainstream now in your view?
The analogy that I think of for where we're at in the journey of Bitcoin is if people think back a little bit to Facebook, when I believe Facebook IPO'd in 2011, and in the lead up to 2011, a lot of people are familiar with Facebook. Maybe they'd used it personally or they knew somebody using it, but it wasn't really an investment opportunity for most people. And then when the company went public, I think it was around $35 a share, suddenly it became an available investment opportunity for people to consider. And I think similarly, Bitcoin has been on a journey the last 16 years where a lot of people have heard a bit about it. Maybe they have a family member who talks about it over the holidays. Maybe they've dabbled in it themselves, but it has felt a little bit off the run and difficult. And I think that last year with the introduction of the Bitcoin ETFs, it was almost like the IPO moment for Bitcoin, where suddenly it rocketed into being something that most investors could access in the familiar format of an ETF. They could, type a ticker into the brokerage account or the custodial solution they use, and access Bitcoin as an investment opportunity. And so I think since the beginning of 2024, since the beginning of last year, we've entered a new chapter for the space where it is becoming more mainstream. And we're seeing a huge cross section of new investors investing in the Bitwise Bitcoin ETF and various solutions that we have that haven't before. So I think we've entered the next chapter. It's certainly not the end of the journey, but I think it's no longer the beginning either.
Okay, no longer the beginning. Certainly more adoption, maybe not quite mainstream, because some would argue maybe it's not necessarily mainstream, especially we don't have all the regulatory guardrails around it, and even crypto enthusiasts are calling for that as well, as I'm sure you are. Let's talk a little bit about some of the recent price action in Bitcoin. So Bitcoin this month falling to the lowest level in a few months, below 90,000. Is that cause for concerns, or how should investors interpret that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the thing that everyone knows, but has to sort of be experienced in this space, is that it's a volatile asset class, and week to week, month to month, experiencing that volatility can be noteworthy to investors. But the reality is that over the last decade plus, that volatility has accrued to the upside for investors. And indeed, last year, Bitcoin went from somewhere around 35,000 to over 100,000. Now at the start of this year, it's trimmed in a bit. I think that the context around Bitcoin is more constructive than it's ever been. So I look at something like the move to 90,000 or 88,000, and I ask, why is it moving? Is there something structurally different about Bitcoin? Has something happened with the underlying software? Is there something structurally different about the opportunity set, the distrust of of monetary policies around the world, of intermediaries, and the existing financial system. And if those two things haven't changed, then it's likely a volatility that's flowing from the market structure, be it hedge funds taking down risk or positioning around a short-term event. So I think that's the story here. I think that the long-term investor's opportunity in crypto is better than it's ever been. And I think that the week to week and month to month volatility is the story around the opportunity we have right now, which is Bitcoin closer to 90,000 than 100,000.
So I want to ask you off the back of that. I'm going to ask you a question two different ways. We'll start with when there are macro headwinds, often you have this, kind of risk off where you see that impacting equities, and you see that also in relation to the effect on crypto and Bitcoin as well. So what does that mean when you see, kind of some concern in the macro environment as it relates to the impact to crypto and what it just means for the overall asset class?
Yeah. There's a lot happening right now in general with the new administration, and I think a lot of investors have some level of uncertainty. I think for asset classes writ large, there's questions about interest rates, which people think will come down, but they don't know over what time and how steeply. There are now questions for a lot of equities and companies around tariffs and trade policy, around geopolitical conflict, and around domestic policy. So I think that there's a lot that markets have to digest at the moment. For Bitcoin, the things that matter the most are, does the asset, the blockchain, and this is true of most cryptocurrencies, continue to see adoption, more and more people using these blockchains and systems? Does there continue to be distrust of the geopolitics in the world, the central banking policy in the world? Does monetary supply continue to trend upward? Deficits continue to trend upward? Um, and then finally, is the network continuing to be operated securely? And I think that those are the subset of the macro characteristics and dimensions that are the important ones for the crypto asset class. And I think monetary policy has been a question that's been fluctuating. I think the expectations for rate cuts have changed a little bit over the last 12 months. But I think in general, across those dimensions, it has been a relatively stable story. And so that's a reason that when we look at the macro picture, and our CIO, Matt Hogan, comments frequently, it appears very productive for the reasons that people like to own digital assets.
Speaking of how Bitcoin is perceived, it's often referred to as like a gold. In other words, a store of value, and sometimes it's called digital gold, right? Does that narrative still exist? Is that how it should be viewed, or is it evolving?
Yeah, that narrative is definitely still with us, and I think it's the sort of the two words that do a lot of the work in helping somebody start to understand Bitcoin. Having said that, I think it's a little bit like describing Uber as a taxi on your phone. It's not completely perfect, and in the same way that if I remember when Uber was developing as a new company and a new application. And if you simply had the view that the opportunity for Uber was to take some market share from taxis, you would have wildly underestimated the opportunity for that company. And a reason that the opportunity was much larger is that, in fact, Uber is much better than taxis. You could order it from anywhere. You could pay without having to swipe a credit card. You could see reviews. And drivers could more easily come onto the network and offer to provide rides. Similarly, for Bitcoin, I think that digital gold helps somebody start to see that it's an asset whose value is related to its scarcity. But there are many things about Bitcoin that improve on the model of gold. You can, of course, move it very easily. You don't have to do an assay test to verify that it's real in the way that you have to do with gold. You can pay with Bitcoin in certain circumstances. It's very cheap to store. And so there are a number of things about Bitcoin that I think improve on gold and could be a reason that its opportunity is actually greater than gold over time. Of course, that has to be seen. And so I think today, many people are still refer to as digital gold as a way of moving the mental model in a productive direction, but it is ultimately a different thing, and I think stands to be better than gold in a lot of ways.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. The one thing I would ask about, I guess, the payment factor is it's not necessarily easy to pay. It's not like traditional currency. I can't just pay you. It's not like dollars, and in that sense. So, what would you say about that? Could we see the evolution where we can pay just as easily with Bitcoin as we do with dollars?
Yeah, that's such a great point, and you're totally right about that. And I think the reality is that it's payments is not the primary use case of Bitcoin today. It's
Hmm.
primarily used as an investment asset to store wealth, where the supply is scarce, and so you don't have to worry about inflation in the same way you do with other assets. So I do think it's most important to understand that today Bitcoin is not primarily a payments solution. It's just a capability of Bitcoin. So there are people who use it to purchase real estate or to purchase make very large purchases, or in certain jurisdictions where the tax creates a circumstance that's conducive to it. It can be used. There are certain countries like El Salvador that have enabled payments more
Hmm.
widely, but again, it's not the primary use of it today. Today, it's used much more commonly as an investment asset and a store of value. Uh, and so on the payments front, I think it remains to be seen. There are some technology companies that are working to make it easier to pay with Bitcoin.
Hmm.
It might be that there has to be um, a revision to the tax status of Bitcoin before a lot of people would use it, because you're not used to paying capital gains tax when you're buying a coffee, and if you
Right.
bought a coffee with Bitcoin, you'd have to do that. So I don't think that that's the driving force, and I think most people who own Bitcoin, if they reflect on what their expectations are for it, don't expect to be paying with it. But it is a capability that in certain contexts can be useful.
I know we all want to reduce our capital gains tax, and that's not a fun piece of the equation. All right, let's talk a little bit about, you all have some new news. You had a new capital raise, $70 million equity raise. Tell us a little bit about that and your plans for it.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So we announced a new $70 million round in Bitwise that is a combination of technology investors and financial institutions. So led by a firm called Electric Capital, with technology investors like On Ventures, Highland Capital, Coastal Ventures, General Catalyst. And then on the financial institution side, Mass Mutual, the insurance company many people know, and the MIT Endowment. That in general is the combination of expertise that we have tried to build the firm around, which is for this asset class that's fundamentally software, to have technologists and investment management professionals, to bring them together, and therefore to be able to serve clients and to operate investments in the best way for this space. So that's a bit about the round and some of the people involved. We're very excited to have them as backers of Bitwise. And then
Hmm.
in terms of what the funding does for us, it enables us to continue to develop our solutions for clients. We'll grow the staff from 100 to 130 or more this year.
There's some job opportunities there. We like that. All right. I wish you the best in your hiring for those roles. But let's talk a little bit about some of your ETFs. You've got BITB, you've got an Ethereum ETF. Which of the Bitwise ETFs are the most popular right now?
Because of the developments last year, many people know about the Bitwise Bitcoin ETF BITB. Some people know it because it's a low fee option at 20 basis points of management fees. Others know it because we publish the public wallet addresses, so investors can verify the Bitcoin holdings directly themselves, which is a new innovation that Bitwise is the first to do and is uniquely possible with Bitcoin. We support the open source developers who maintain the Bitcoin blockchain and donate 10% of gross profits, and actually just made that first annual donation to Bitcoin developers a week ago. So many investors like it for that reason. It's a high quality product. It's a low cost product, and it embraces some of the unique aspects of this space. The Ethereum ETF is similar in that regard. Other investors, two other products that have been very popular with investors from Bitwise are the Bitwise 10 Crypto Index Fund, which trades with the ticker BITW. That is a solution for an investor who says, I think Bitcoin is compelling. I think the crypto space is compelling. I'm just not sure how it's all going to play out. And I don't want to accidentally, identify the internet, but wind up owning the wrong search engine. And so that is an index fund that holds the 10 most valuable assets by market cap and allows an investor to be positioned, 4 or 5 years from now, for a world where Bitcoin ended up being the most valuable thing. That index fund will hold primarily Bitcoin. And conversely, if other assets rise to greater value, it'll rebalance to that. So it gives investors a more flexible way of taking exposure to the space. And then the last product maybe I'd mention is BITQ, the Bitwise Crypto Industry Innovators ETF, which allows investors to invest in an index of the crypto companies. So businesses that are deriving revenues from trading commissions that leverage the volatility of the space, or mining businesses, and a variety of other things, but where the investor says, I think that this new industry creates a lot of revenue opportunity, and I like to own those companies. And so BITQ appeals to some investors for that reason. We have a lot of different products today, and we actually we'll have more in the future. So investors can find those at bitwiseinvestments.com and learn more about them. But those are some of the ones that that investors are quite popular with investors.
I want to ask you something I've been curious about: the performance of Ethereum compared to Bitcoin, especially like when you look at a year. Yes, the crypto space has been, challenged this year so far compared to like last year. And some of that is because you're just waiting for some clouds to clear on the horizon. But Ethereum hasn't performed at the same level on a year-over-year basis compared to Bitcoin. Why is that?
It's always hard to say. Ethereum, the way I would describe Ethereum to investors is to think about it a little bit like an operating system, the way you might think about Windows versus Android versus Mac OS or iOS. It's in a category of public blockchains that provides an operating system. People can build applications on top. People can use those applications. And so Ethereum layer ones like Solana are in that category, which is a bit different than Bitcoin. Ethereum over the last year has continued to see new applications. Many people have heard about stable coins, which often settle using these operating systems. People have heard about DeFi, and a flourishing ecosystem of millions of users, applications that are quite useful. I think that the story for Ethereum of late has, to some extent, been a story of flows and the market structure. And what I mean by that is, last year, for a lot of investors, because of the news around the Bitcoin ETF, their focus was starting with Bitcoin. And so an investor who said, okay, something has changed, this space is growing up, I want to take a look at it, and I'm going to start by looking at Bitcoin. And that takes some time for investors. And then there are other investors who they follow the space more regularly, they may be passionate about the space. And I think for a lot of those investors, they were focused on what are the new things being built. I've known about Ethereum for a long time. I've known about Bitcoin, but what are some of the up and coming things that are maybe just coming together, and looking for those smaller cap opportunities. And I think as a byproduct, Ethereum is sort of stuck in the middle over the last 12 months, where new investors, investment professionals, a lot of institutional investors that are clients of ours, are starting to work on Bitcoin, and then these sort of savvy, passionate individuals were looking out the risk curve for the next Ethereum or the next Solana. And so I think that's part of the story on flows. But taking a step back from that, as we discussed earlier in the conversation, flows and volatility can really influence the price week to week, month to month, or for periods of time. But you have to step back and say, are the underlying drivers moving in the right direction. And for Ethereum and layer ones, that's users, that's applications, that's the security of the network. And those things for Ethereum continue to be exceptionally strong. So we have a very optimistic outlook. I believe we made have a price prediction in our research at the beginning of this year that investors can find on our website. But a very constructive outlook for Ethereum.
So when you think about beyond Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I think you kind of alluded to this, what do you see as the next frontier when it comes to widening adoption or institutional adoption, or even the next layer of, say, crypto mutual funds, et cetera? What do you see as the next frontier?
So there's sort of the underlying assets in public blockchains, and then there are the sort of investment vehicles and opportunities. In the underlying assets, I think there will continue to be a lot of development and progress on stable coins. So people using blockchains like Ethereum to send dollars around the world and to store dollars. I think you'll continue to see progress on the operating systems, Ethereum, Solana, Aptos, and others. I think you'll see continued progress on DeFi. These are financial services offered autonomously through a blockchain, as well as some offline networks. There's a Google Maps competitor that's built on a blockchain. There's a Wi-Fi provider that's now built on a blockchain. And I know that some of that can sound a little crazy. The thing I would say when it comes to crypto is to remember that this is software. And in the same way that if you open your iPhone and you open the App Store, there's a million apps in the App Store. Many of them are no good. There are a lot of them that aren't useful to you. Maybe you have 60 downloaded on your phone and maybe use 8 a day. Crypto is software. So a lot of things are going to be attempted. Bitwise works to try to identify the ones that mature to relevance for investors. But I think you'll just continue to see a lot of innovation. And I mentioned a few of the themes. I think AI and the intersection of that with blockchains will also be a theme on the underlying assets. In terms of investment,
Go ahead.
please.
No, I was okay. I was going to say that's a great point about the apps on my phone, because I was about to pick up my phone and look at, to compare which ones I actually use to how many that are downloaded. Is probably too many. I want to go back to something you talked about a little bit earlier.
Sure.
You talked about Facebook. I know you had worked previously with Facebook, Instagram. They went public back in 2012. What products did you work on that inform how Bitwise operates now?
Sure. Yeah, I worked on monetization for Instagram, so helping advertisers reach consumers. For Facebook, monetizing video, and a few other things. I think that the things that I took away from my experience at Facebook and Instagram, which were places that I loved working, that ultimately have played into my desire to work in this space and some of my views in starting Bitwise are three things, and I'll try to run through them really quickly. The first is just at those firms, you can see the scale of the internet. Billions of people. At this point, it's banal. Everyone knows that about Facebook, but the reach of these applications through the internet is so remarkable. There was a time when people pointed out that the membership, the users of some of these apps were greater than the members of most religions. The second thing you could see is how fragmented and difficult sort of the world still is to operate on in a global scale. So if you wanted to send messages or photos through Facebook or Instagram anywhere in the world, that was easy enough. But as soon as you want to go a layer deeper and do something in e-commerce or do something in financial services, you're dealing with 170 different currencies, regulations, infrastructure, logistics, and so on and so forth. And then the last thing that you could see at those firms was the declining trust in business leaders, political leaders, and institutions. And so it's against that foil, the scale of the internet, but the difficulty of building on the internet globally and the declining trust in institutions and leaders. And then along comes public blockchains, which say, we're going to leverage the scale of the internet, but we're going to provide one standard. Bitcoin is the same everywhere. Ethereum is the same everywhere. And we're going to address the declining trust in corporations or leaders by doing away with them and making this fundamental innovation of systems that have no CEO and no corporation. And that struck me as 20 years into the internet, as we are, an innovation that makes sense and could play a meaningful role in how the world is different decades from now than it was in 2003 or 2012. And so
Yeah.
we see public blockchains as potentially changing the world and also creating a lot of opportunities for investors.
What do you say to skeptics who still argue that crypto is a bubble, a speculative bubble, or lacks intrinsic value? Some will, bring up the tulip crisis back in the day. So, what do you say to people who have that argument?
I think all of those reactions are reasonable. I think for every investor who owns crypto today, they had those thoughts somewhere along the journey, and I think it's very natural. Bitwise has been around for 8 years, and we have many clients who consider that, and it's prudent to consider that. Um, what would I say to investors is, we could talk through a number of dimensions. We could talk about, some of the lens that I just provided around its role in the world and how public blockchains
Mm-hmm.
solve some of the things I saw at Facebook. We could talk about some of the applications that are being built. We could just talk about it as an asset class and what are the underlying drivers, the low correlations. We could talk about the thesis of some of our clients who invest in it.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, I think the other thing that I would remark on in 2025 is that not everyone has to invest in crypto.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you asked 100 people what they think about owning Apple stock today, it wouldn't be 100 people who say they want to own it. And the reality is that for any investment, even the most mature and familiar and traditional investments, investors don't always agree. And so I don't expect that the future is that every investor will agree on crypto. The thing I would just say is that there are partners out there, people like Bitwise, who provide research and information that can help inform one's mental model. And then if the conclusion is this is not for me, I think that'll be all right. And not every investment is right for every investor, but I do think we're now
Mm-hmm.
seeing a lot more investors um, taking the time to consider the space, and a lot of them concluding that they want to own it.
If this was a debate, I would say you nailed it, giving a very balanced perspective for someone who is clearly, I mean, in theory, you have to be bullish on the space, but I love your measured response there. Let's talk a little bit about a post Gary Gensler SEC. What's your expectation in terms of how things will operate between the industry and the SEC?
Oh my gosh, we are so excited. Bitwise is a company that is a registered investment advisor, a commodity pool operator, and interacts with a lot of different regulations. And it's our job for clients to steward their capital, protect their investments. We're really proud of having done that for 8 years. And so we interact with regulators like the SEC routinely
Mm-hmm.
over the course of many years. I can tell you that the tone, even just since the inauguration, has been a 180 difference. Of course, the new chair, Paul Atkins, has not yet been confirmed. So we're in an interim period here where the old chair, Gary Gensler, is out. The new chair has not yet been confirmed. We have the interim chair, Ueda, um, and um, and then Hester Peirce, who's been assigned to look after crypto. And already there's a lot of great dialogue. Um, they're seeking education on certain topics, which makes so much sense because it's a complicated field. And if they're going to productively regulate it, which is very important for most investors and our clients, regulation is helpful and helps build trust in the asset class. But as a complicated and emerging space, that also means that there's education that has to take place. So we're seeing them seeking to understand the nuances, being very constructive in the dialogue, and we're very optimistic. That doesn't mean that everything in crypto should be allowed and that there should be no rules. I don't think that that's what we want, and I don't think that's what most investors want. I think what Bitwise and many of the professional firms in the space have wanted for a long time is clarity and a productive perimeter. And I think that all signs suggest that that will be the new reality taking effect this year.
Yeah, I've heard similar commentary from others in the crypto space, wanting some clarity on regulation and wanting some guardrails there. All right, Hunter, we'll leave our conversation there. That's Hunter Horsley, CEO, Bitwise Asset Management. Thank you so much for joining us. For more information on Bitwise, you can visit bitwiseinvestments.com. That's it for this edition of Market Overtime. I'm Diane King Hall. Be sure to like and subscribe to the Schwab Network YouTube and Spotify channels. Thank you so much for tuning in.